Godzilla is the longest running film franchise of all time, spanning over 7 decades with over 38 films. He has become an international pop culture icon that is recognizable all over the world, even to people who have never seen any of his movies. With a franchise this long, it's interesting because the films vary so heavily in quality, but they also vary in tone and style throughout the eras. Sometimes Godzilla is a hero, sometimes he is a villain, sometimes he's a reluctant hero, sometimes he is an amoral animal. What started out in 1954 as a poignant and mournful look at the destruction caused by the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki turned into one of the most entertaining and engaging franchises ever made. The Godzilla franchise is divided into distinct eras, each with common trends and varying qualities. It starts off in 1954 with the first Godzilla, and that starts off the Showa era, which runs until 1975, ending with Terror of Mechagodzilla. The Showa era is the earliest era, and it's known for its silliness, its campiness, and a lot of times very poor quality in special effects and low budgets, but it's often well regarded simply because of its charm, its camp, and its nostalgia. 9 years after the Showa era ended, in 1984, Return of Godzilla came out, which started the Heisei era, which is widely regarded as the best era in Godzilla, and that's an opinion I hold as well. The Heisei era is defined by higher quality effects, better looking suits, better looking practical effects, and also higher quality just writing and general overall quality of the films, while also having a lot more unique and different kaijus. There's technically another era called the TriStar era, but that literally just has one film and an animated show. TriStar is an American company that bought the rights to Godzilla, and in 1998 they released the American version of Godzilla, which was not well received, and so the TriStar era doesn't really count as an era, it just doesn't fit into the other ones. Afterwards, in 1999, Japan got the rights back to Godzilla, and they made the Millennium Era, which is defined by the use of CGI for the first time, or at least in a major way in the Godzilla franchise. The Millennium Era is a bit of a mixed bag, you'll see in our ranking here. And the Millennium Era is also very inspired by a lot of animes that came out between then and the Showa era, like Gundam and Voltron. One of the recent eras that is still going on right now started in 2014, and that's the American Monsterverse. This had the US and Hollywood taking the reins back and trying to make their version of Godzilla in a connected universe similar to the Heisei and Showa eras. The Monsterverse is also a mixed bag, and it's kind of hard to decipher a general consensus. A lot of people hold it in high regard because the CGI and just the effects in general are so fantastic. The technology has caught up with the concepts of Godzilla. Other people think that it is kind of Hollywood slop, it doesn't really mean much, and it doesn't have the same charm and soul that the Showa era had. And the most recent era is the Reiwa era, which is probably the least cohesive of the bunch, and I think it wouldn't normally be grouped into an era if the other ones weren't grouped into eras already. This is the Japanese modern Godzillas. These include Shin Godzilla, Godzilla -1, and the anime trilogy on Netflix. Again, it's the least cohesive. They don't really have a lot of connections. I mean, Shin Godzilla and Godzilla -1 are completely distinct and wildly different takes on Godzilla, so it's not really connected in that sense, but we are expecting sequels to Shin Godzilla and Godzilla -1, so we'll see where this era takes us. With that being said, let's rank all 38 Godzilla films here. I won't be using re-edits in this, I will only be using the original edit. So there's the original 1954 Godzilla, but there's also Godzilla King of the Monsters, which was the American re-edit that introduced a new character. I'm just not counting that. I'm just going to do the original. Similarly, The Return of Godzilla also has Godzilla 1985. Again, it is the American re-edit. I'm just not going to rank that. I'm just going to use the original version. Also, before we start, a lot of these films have different names and different titles depending on what region they were released, what language they were released, and when they were released. So if you don't see a film that you've seen, it might be under a different name. For example, Godzilla vs. Hedorah is sometimes called Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. I'll try to name those when they appear, but I might not get to every single name. Starting in last place at 38, I have All Monsters Attack. This is sometimes titled Godzilla's Revenge for some reason, which doesn't really make sense to me. This is, without a doubt, the worst Godzilla film. This is such an abysmal movie, and I hate it so much. This film was released when Godzilla's closest rival in terms of marketing was becoming popular, and that's Gamera. Gamera was a kaiju that is more tailored towards children. He's a protector of all children, and so Toho wanted to make Godzilla appeal to children more. So in this film, the main character is a child who has difficulties in school. He doesn't have parents, and he gets bullied, and so at night when he dreams about being on Monster Island with Godzilla, and there's another kaiju there that actually goes by the same name as his bully. But most importantly, there's Minilla, which is Godzilla's son, who kind of befriends the little boy, and this is all in his dreams. It's all like hypothetical. This concept sounds sweet, and I think it could have done really well, but it just had such a low budget. There are so many scenes that are just literally taken out of other movies. Like, you just re-edited other movies into this movie, so half of this film is just other films that are better. I also really hate Minilla. I think he is the ugliest kaiju. I hate looking at him. He makes me so uncomfortable and disturbed, and I think he's supposed to be cute, but I don't like him. Visually, this movie is just a mess. It is the ugliest Godzilla movie. If you are going to skip any of these, skip this one. At number 37, I have Godzilla the Planet Eater. This is the film that is the ending of the anime trilogy on Netflix, and I really hate the anime trilogy. I think a lot of people really hate this trilogy. They're really poorly executed. The whole story over the 3 films should have been just one film. There's such little story across the trilogy that nothing happens for most of it. And it really makes me upset because I think the anime trilogy has potential with this really unique art style and really great animation, but the story is just so weak and so nothing that I can't even enjoy it a little bit. At number 36, I have Godzilla City on the Edge. This is the second film in the anime trilogy that is just not worth your time. If you're a Godzilla fan, you can watch it just to complete it, but if you're interested in getting into Godzilla, skip the anime trilogy. They're not worth it. I got excited because this film was supposed to have Mechagodzilla in it, and Mechagodzilla is one of my favorite kaijus, but turns out Mechagodzilla in this film is literally just like a city, and again, it's just boring. And my favorite director of all time is Andrei Tarkovsky. I've seen Bellatar's Shatantango. I'm well versed in boring movies. This movie is more boring than any of those. At number 35, I have Son of Godzilla. Going back to Minilla, I really don't like this guy, and this is his debut. I think it's really funny that in this film, Godzilla just finds an egg, and that's his son. They never really explain where this egg come from. Is there a mom Godzilla? Does Godzilla reproduce asexually through budding? But that doesn't make sense. It's an egg. He has to produce an egg somehow. It doesn't make any sense. I think that aspect is funny, but the entire film is just really a letdown. Again, Minilla does not look good. I hate seeing him on my screen. There are a couple of cute moments in this film, particularly Godzilla teaching Minilla how to use his atomic breath. But the villains in this film are these giant insects, which I don't think are the worst kaijus ever, but compared to the other monsters that we meet in this series, these are just not that interesting. There are a lot of films in this franchise that are like this, that are set on a remote island, and it's not always bad, but I do miss the city destruction of the better movies. At 34, I have King Kong vs. Godzilla. I know this is sacrilege. I know a lot of people love this film very much, but I didn't watch it when I was younger. I watched this when I was in my 20s, so I can watch it without the nostalgia glasses and realize that it's really bad. I respect this film's impact. It's the first Godzilla film in color. It is the duel between two of the most iconic giant monsters in cinema. But the execution just is very lackluster to me. There's a lot of fun in this, like King Kong throwing a tree inside of Godzilla's mouth, but I think this film looks awful. I think the suits in this are really poorly done. I think the plot is just completely incoherent, and sometimes it's funny, but sometimes it's really not funny. There's weird brown face that kind of makes me uncomfortable in this. There are so many better ones to watch instead of this one, but I know a lot of people have nostalgia around this, and I don't blame them for that. At 33, I have the TriStar era, the 1998 American Godzilla. This film is just not good. This is one of the longest ones in the franchise, and it does not need to be that long. One of the main complaints of the 1998 Godzilla is the design of Godzilla himself. A lot of people don't even call her Godzilla in this. They call her Zilla because this is like a weird iguana looking thing. That's not what Godzilla looks like. And I get trying to have a different approach to it, but I don't personally love this design. I don't think it's like sacrilege to change Godzilla's design, but this isn't the way to go. I also think inherently an American film about Godzilla doesn't work as well because it doesn't have the context of Japan and recovering from nuclear weaponry, but it's not the end of the world. But I do think that this film is much more inspired by something like Jurassic Park than Godzilla. Overall, just really lackluster, doesn't feel great as a Godzilla film. At 32, I have Godzilla Raids Again. This is one of the most important movies in the franchise because it's the first sequel to Godzilla, and it's also the first time we see Godzilla fighting another kaiju. However, overall, this film is very lackluster as well. It's very mediocre. The other kaiju in this is Anguirus, who, I respect for being the first foe of Godzilla, but Anguirus, in my opinion, is just not that good of a kaiju. I really don't care about Anguirus. This film came out less than a year after the original Godzilla came out, and you can tell it was really thrown together. It just doesn't have the care and the quality that a lot of the other films have. At 31, I'm finishing off the anime trilogy with Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. This is definitely the best of the trilogy, but that is not saying much because it's really bad still. I think the reason I like this one is that it was the first one, so it's setting up the potential of this series, and I think that the anime trilogy did have a lot of potential, and I was really intrigued at the beginning of this film, but it just was a complete letdown. Again, it doesn't have a very interesting plot. It was very, very boring, but I really did like how they depicted Godzilla in this. I think he was very intimidating, foreboding, and I think it was a unique design that I really appreciated, but it just falls flat, uninteresting, not worth it. At number 30, I have Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. This is the first film from the Millennium series on this ranking list so far. I think this is a very bland entry. I think this is like the least you can do to actually make a Godzilla movie while still having it be a Godzilla movie. It's very by the numbers. I do like Godzilla having a flying opponent. I think that adds a lot of intrigue and a lot of coolness to the fights, but I think that the use of CGI on Megaguirus just falls flat. The CGI on Megaguirus is really, really bad, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, and I'm not one to normally complain about bad CGI, but it really, really detracts from it in this film. I think CGI can be done well, but I think it has to be done with a lot of purpose and a lot of care. I don't think it's just the quality of the animation itself. I think it's more about how they utilize it and how they display the weight and size of the kaijus. I think if they're flying around super easily, you don't feel the weight and the impact of their steps, or when they move and slam into things. That really weakens the monstrousness of these monsters, and that's when CGI becomes really bad, and that's very on display here. Number 29, I have Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. This is the most recent Godzilla film, and I am not a fan of the MonsterVerse very much. They all seem to be lacking something. They don't have the soul and the charm that the previous eras have, and I think that they're just kind of like regurgitated slop. But I think Godzilla x Kong is the worst of the bunch of the MonsterVerse. I think this film really made me mad because I was expecting a lot, and I was really excited after the trailers. These movies are big CGI fests, and I get that. They're giant monsters. We have the technology to depict them with CGI, and that's a good thing. But similar to Megaguirus, it doesn't utilize the weight of these creatures. We have these monsters flying around like ballerinas when they're supposed to be the largest, most powerful beings. Godzilla's literally jumping and flipping and zooming around, and I don't mind him running in this scene because I think it actually has him have that powerful steps, but a lot of this time he's just like jumping around so easily that you lose that weight. Also, with the Hollow Earth, I don't like the Hollow Earth subplot because it just makes a bigger version of our planet, so all of the giant monsters are just normal size. So then what's the point of them being giant monsters? You completely lose the scale in this film, and it really detracts from what makes monster movies great. At 28, I have Ibira: Horror of the Deep. This is definitely one of the lower budget films in the franchise, and it's not bad. It just kind of is a victim of its low budget. It's set on a remote tropical island, so it's away from the cities, and it's obvious that they did that because of budget constraints. It does have a cool tropical vibe at times, and I think Ebira's design is pretty solid, but the execution of their design was not super good because the fight ended up being like a volleyball match with a rock between Godzilla and Ebira, which is funny, but it does lack a lot of what these kaiju fights really need. I do like an aquatic villain. I think that's a cool route to take, but this film didn't have the budget to really emphasize those unique aspects. At 27, I have Godzilla vs. Kong. This is the MonsterVerse version, not the Showa era version. And again, I'm just not a fan of these MonsterVerse movies. It has a lot of the same issues that Godzilla x Kong had with its weightlessness, with its overuse of CGI, and not having the impact of the characters. But it's not to the same extent as Godzilla x Kong, which is why it's higher up. I think the big issue here is the human characters. In Godzilla x Kong, the human characters are barely there, but in Godzilla vs. Kong, the human characters are big players, and they're just really annoying, and they're not entertaining to watch, and I hate every character in the MonsterVerse. I know we don't watch these movies for the human characters, but they're still part of the movies, and you still have to watch them, so might as well think they're good. At 26, I have Godzilla vs. Gigan. I think Gigan is one of the coolest villains. I remember being obsessed with him when I played the PlayStation 2 Godzilla Save the Earth game. This is the turning point in the list. This is where the films start getting good. I do like these movies from here on out, even though they have their problems. Again, Gigan is a cool villain. I just think the plot of this is very silly. It has like a theme park and a comic book artist. It's just very strange. I think it could have been a lot better, and I'm glad we get to see Gigan in better movies later down the road. At 25, I have Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. This is the first Heisei era film on this list, and it is definitely the lowest in my opinion. I think a lot of other people would have this a lot higher than me. I just really didn't care for this when I watched it. It has this cool time travel plot, which I always love time travel in sci-fi, but I think it was executed poorly in this film. It changes Godzilla's origins, and in this one, Godzilla is like a dinosaur on an island starting out, and so they go back in time to defeat this dinosaur. I really hated this dinosaur subplot. I think it completely ruined the movie, and it's why this film is so low, even though it does have some good moments, like when King Ghidorah becomes Mecha King Ghidorah. But we spend so much time going back in time to this fake Godzilla dinosaur when I just want to spend time with real Godzilla. At number 24, I have Godzilla 2000 Millennium. This is the first film in the Millennium series that took the reins of Godzilla back from the Americans. This is a major introduction of CGI in Godzilla, where Godzilla is shot in full CGI in a lot of these shots, and again, it's just not, the technology wasn't there at this point. I do think that the opening scene of this film is really good. It starts off really good, establishing their dominance with this character, and I think the ending scene is really cool. I like the villain in this, Olga. I think that is a really unique design and a really powerful foe. It's just everything in between that cool opening and that cool ending just bogs the movie down. At number 23, I have Godzilla King of the Monsters. This is another MonsterVerse film, and this is probably the most frustrating Godzilla film to talk about because I think it has some of the highest highs and some of the lowest lows in the entire franchise. This film's CGI is incredible, and they do portray the size, the weight of these monsters really well. These monsters are terrifying in this film, and that's what elevates this way above the other Godzilla films in the MonsterVerse. But again, the human characters in the MonsterVerse are the worst characters ever written. And again, I know we don't watch it for the human characters, but this film is one of the longest Godzilla films at like 2 hours and 20 minutes. There is no reason that this film should be that long. Shin Godzilla makes sense to be 2 hours. It actually has something to say. But Godzilla King of the Monsters is a fun action film. It does not need to be almost 2.5 hours. So because of its long run time, we have to spend so much time with these annoying characters, and it completely ruins the amazing effects and the amazing action in this film. It's a really complicated film for me to talk about because it's hard to decipher, is this a really good movie, is it a really bad movie, because it has so many good and so many bad parts. At 22, I have Godzilla Tokyo SOS. Similar to Godzilla King of the Monsters, I do find this a frustrating one to talk about because it has a lot of good and a lot of bad. It is a sequel to Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, which is much higher on this list than this one, and it feels like it's just a rehash of everything that film did, but just worse. I do really love that it has Mothra in it. Mothra is my favorite kaiju outside of Godzilla, and it also has Mechagodzilla, who's another one of my favorite kaijus. This is a recipe for success for me, but it just falls flat. It does everything Godzilla against Mechagodzilla does, but worse. It's less dynamic, it's less interesting, it has a worse plot, it has a worse characters. I do think that if Godzilla against Mechagodzilla didn't exist, I might like this more, but it just pales in comparison. At 21, I have Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. This is actually the film that grew a lot in my ranking from the first to second time I watched it. Space Godzilla is easily one of the coolest designs. This is one of the coolest kaijus, one of the most unique designs, and I think that they really deliver on that design with the crystals, with the massive size, and the sheer strength of Space Godzilla. I think it has a very cookie cutter plot that really holds it back in my opinion, but I think the action sequences make up for the minimal plot and the lackluster characters. As long as the characters don't actively annoy me like the Monsterverse, I can get around that. At number 20, I have Invasion of Astro Monster. This is probably the goofiest and silliest of all of the Godzilla movies. It has the iconic Godzilla victory dance. But it embraces that campiness, and I can respect that. I think King Ghidorah is one of the coolest villains. You know, he's probably Godzilla's biggest foe. And while this has an absolutely ridiculous plot about these aliens trying to take over Earth by kidnapping Godzilla and all the other kaijus and trying to control them with like magnets or electro something, it doesn't make any sense, but it's so fun to watch. I can't hate this movie. And that is the end of part 1 of my Godzilla ranking. I hope you all enjoyed, and make sure you stay tuned for part 2, which is coming out very soon.